All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode for Root Cause Solutions for You. I am very delighted to have today, and I have my notes so I know exactly how to introduce our guest for today. We have Joseph Strickland. He is the owner of Better Body Clinical Nutrition in Texas, right?
That's right. Austin, Texas, actually.
Nice.
Austin in Texas, Austin is kind of its own state within Texas,
There you go. There you go. He is an advanced clinical nutritionist, and he is also got a bachelor's in nutrition science.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a nutritionist. I've been in practice since 2008 and at Better Body Clinical Nutrition. And I actually didn't plan on getting into nutrition. It wasn't necessarily that I woke up when I was 3 years old. A lot of times your kids, they'll say, oh, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. But I didn't say I want to be a nutritionist. However, I kind of was, because my parents had told me that aspartame and NutraSeed wasn't that great. And so when we would go to the grocery store, I always loved going to the grocery store. I would see that in people's carts, and I would walk up to them and I would say, hey, don't get that. That's bad for you, And so I was already telling people what they shouldn't eat from a very early age. And then later I found it again when I was in my 20s. I started to get staph infections. And that's something that you normally get in your 80s. But what happened was, after about 3 rounds of antibiotics, I asked the medical doctor, why is it that I'm getting staph infections? And he said, no, no one knows. You just take the antibiotics and hope you get better. And so that, to me, didn't quite work as an answer. And right around that time, there was the documentary Super Size Me with Morgan Spurlock, which is shows you a person that's eating McDonald's 3 times a day, 7 days a week. I would argue that McDonald's has gotten a little bit better since then. They at least have some salads and stuff like that. There's still some food quality issues that I could argue about. But at that time, there wasn't really any awareness about what was in there. And since then you've had, Food Babe talk about the same chemical that's in a yoga mat being in the bread at Subway. That's not in there anymore. They don't have a lot of the preservatives that they used to have in the chicken nuggets. And that's all because of people bringing to light, what that's about. And I read the book Fast Food Nation, which is a fascinating book, but one of the parts tells you how they make like French fries and burgers, and they go over how, if you go to Wendy's, it smells a certain way, and if you go to McDonald's, it smells different. And it's because they actually, the same companies that make perfume, they make the flavorings and the smells for that. So when I learned all of that, I was like, wow, I wonder if that. So I went and saw somebody that does some version of muscle testing, not nutrition response testing. But when I started to not get as many staph infections, I was like, oh man, I've got to learn how this stuff works, right? And so then at that point, one of the best ways to learn it was nutrition response testing with Dr. Freddie Ewan. And so I did that. And then, it kind of, people saw that I got better from that. They saw my struggle with the staph infections. They saw that I got better. And then, it was my mom, my sister, their friend, and then I also managed a chiropractic clinic at the time. And so between what I learned there, and I got to practice for free for a number of years, just kind of doing it. And I'm like, I guess this is what I'm going to do, And so and then I started Better Body Clinical Nutrition in 2008 after about 2 years of that. And I've never stopped, and it's always been amazing to me that it drives itself with word of mouth, because people really do like understanding why something is happening. If a person is having digestive upset, and irritable bowel syndrome, you want to find out what's irritating the bowel, not just go along with, well, my bowel's irritated. There's got to be something that's irritating the bowel. It's in the definition of the word, but it's missing. And it's not the lack of whatever drug handles irritable bowel syndrome. Just like you don't have an aspirin deficiency when you have a headache, right?
True. Yeah.
So that's what got me into nutrition response testing, and really seeing people get better is what keeps me doing what I do.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, you bring so many interesting points. It's so hard to pick which one do I want to talk about a little bit. But something similar happened to me where, as far as like watching that Super Size Me documentary, and
Hmm.
I don't think I've had McDonald's or fast food of any kind ever since. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And it just became also an awareness shift, like if
Hmm.
McDonald's can make money out of selling 5, 10 nuggets for $1, what's in it? Right. And that's
Right.
what I tell clients now. Just think about it. What's in it if they can make money out of that? So that is so awesome. So, and yeah, you're right. People get hooked on, well, how does it work, right? How are you better after having gone to the doctor, having gone to so many specialists and so many different things that now you're, kind of like magically, your health has been restored. And yeah, similar happened to me where no one could figure it out my headaches. And
Hmm.
cardiologist, uh, I had MRIs, I had all kinds of different studies. And it wasn't, too until I found nutrition response testing practitioner that was like, hey, it's actually heavy metals. And guess what? Your diet. So it was like, wow, there's something to this. So I'm so happy to hear that so many of us practitioners find similar, the same path. It's just different.
Hmm.
So tell
Yeah,
us
it
a
starts with, kind of understanding that, wait, what's supposed to work isn't,
yeah,
and then, you're open to, well, let's find another way. And I
yeah,
do tell people, when I first see them, it's not like nutrition response testing isn't odd or different than what you're used to seeing. But
yeah,
the way I explain it is I say, look, you know, a medical doctor takes blood out of your arm, and then they look at it, and then they tell you some things based on that.
yeah,
It's kind of weird too, if you think about it. I'm pressing on your arm, and I'm looking for things, and I'm finding information. So it's my tool that I use as a practitioner to know what to recommend,
yeah,
just like somebody that looks at blood uses their tool for what to recommend. Now,
right,
typically they're in the field of drugs and surgery, so that's a different approach. And
yeah,
what I'm in is I'm into the concept that the body heals itself,
mm-hmm,
and that if you feed the body the components that it needs to rebuild and repair,
yeah,
then it's probably going to try to do that. And then there's some neat things with nutrition response testing that let you find things that can get in the way of the body being able to heal itself. So you've got another layer there,
yeah,
because sometimes the body wants to heal itself, but there's something that's kind of in the way of that happening.
yeah,
A good example of that would be, let's say that somebody is sensitive to, well, make it really simple. If
yeah,
you drink a glass of water, it's good for you. But if you
mm-hmm,
try to drink a pool, it'll kill you, right?
yeah,
So you can have anything and you can go overboard on it. And it is very common in our current situation to just eat the same thing over and over and over in large amounts.
yeah,
Wheat is a great example. You might have a breakfast sandwich that's in a bun for breakfast, a
mm-hmm,
burger for lunch, and then maybe pasta for dinner.
yeah,
And that's a great example of a lot of people that do that, because it's a very easy food to eat very quickly, and it
yeah,
contains or holds. Flour tortillas are another example. So a person can overdose on wheat,
true,
um, even separate from the gluten issue. You hear a lot of people, oh, I'm gluten free, and there's a whole stigma behind it now.
yeah,
The people, oh, they're gluten free. They don't even need to be. It's all in their head. Well, it may be not necessarily the gluten free. It just may be that they're having less wheat
yeah.
because they've been overdosed on it.
Yeah, no, totally. So, so now we've touched this word or this concept, nutrition response testing, right? So some of our followers may already be familiar with that concept, but for the ones that are not, tell us a little bit about like, so what is nutrition response testing?
So, nutrition response testing is a tool that a practitioner uses. It could be a medical doctor, it could be a chiropractor, acupuncturist, nutritionist.
Yeah,
Really, where somebody is at, it isn't as important, but it's a tool that it's based in something called applied kinesiology.
Mhm.
And what its root is, just like we're talking root cause nutrition, the root of nutrition response testing is actually started from a chiropractor named Dr. Goodhart in it was the 1950s, and what
Mhm.
he found was that in chiropractic, it used to be kind of this miracle thing, right? Somebody fell off a tree, their spine went out of alignment, and then afterwards they couldn't walk right, they couldn't hear. The chiropractor came to their house and did one quick adjustment, got it back in, and then the kid could walk again, or could hear again, or could see again. And well, what happened in about 1950 is chiropractors started to notice that the miracles were a little bit
Mm.
less. And Dr. Goodhart wondered why, if he gave a really good adjustment and somebody had neck pain, why didn't the neck pain go away?
Mhm.
And what he found out is that basically, when you look at the organs, every organ has a muscle that's connected to it. Okay. Good
Mhm.
example is gallbladder. If somebody has a gallbladder attack or a problem with their gallbladder, what the medical doctors will look for is pain right here, right?
And
And that's because the reflux from muscle that's connected to the gallbladder is there. And so what he saw was that because the way food was being changed in our society, how it was grown. It used to be you did crop rotation. So one season you'd grow oranges, one season you'd grow bananas, because the soil has 77 minerals, and different fruits and vegetables use different combinations of those minerals. So you didn't want to do the same thing over and over again so that the minerals got depleted.
yeah.
Well, after World War II, so after 1945, essentially, they started using fertilization. They had these big chemical companies after World War II that were created for the war, and they needed to figure out where to put these chemicals because they were in operation, right? They were in the stock market. And what they found is that you could grow pretty much anything with three minerals: phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium. And so instead of using all 77, they started just fertilizing. Now, the problem with that is that when you only use three minerals out of 77, you become deficient in those 74. Well, that carries forward in the feed for the animals that we eat. So the animals become deficient, we become deficient. UT did a study in 2008 where they looked at the nutrient values of an orange
Mhm.
in 2008 versus 1950. And they found that you needed 50 oranges in 2008 to equal one from 1950, right? Which is amazing. And so with nutrition response testing, you're basically using the concept that the body heals itself as your main idea, and then you're figuring out what minerals and support is missing. Just like if you were building a wall with bricks, if you
Mhm.
didn't have the cement to put between the bricks, the bricks wouldn't stand very long, right? Wind could just blow them over, right? So similar concept, you're finding, it's a tool that helps you find what those missing pieces are
Yeah.
so that you're not having to take a ton of supplements, because you can go to the grocery store and see, there's like 1,000 different things. And where do you go? I mean, there's
Yeah.
all these things online that say, oh, take this one, it's this little piece and it's a miracle, and this. And so, the neat thing about a lot of the products that we use in nutrition response testing is that they have all those little pieces of those little things, but they're in a whole combination of things from real food. But
Yeah.
they grow things the way things were grown before 1950. So, with those beets, you're getting a super concentrated beet that
Yeah.
automatically is equal to about 50 you get from the supermarket. And then they're concentrating that further by getting rid of the fiber and the sugar, and
Mhm.
just, getting the what are called the phytonutrients, which is basically everything outside of what you're used to. Like vitamin C is ascorbic acid. Well, there's the things around ascorbic acid, and I think a carrot has like 213 different things in there, right? So if you get concentrated carrots, you're getting
Yeah.
213 things plus the vitamin A, and the various things like that, right? So that aspect of it is amazing. But the way that the tool works is we use an arm that's
Yeah.
connected to that muscular system that's
Hmm.
connected to those organs. And we can tell by resistance whether or not when we press a reflex, whether or not it's causing stress to the body. And only organs that are stressed will respond. And so you get that muscle response, and then we're able to use that as a tool in order to figure out how to pinpoint exactly what to do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's very it's very precise, I find it too, right? Where you take the guess out of it. And yeah, you're right. It is also very comforting for clients who experience such tool as part of their care, because they know what they're taking is exactly what their body needs, is exactly what is going to help them remove those barriers that are preventing them from their body, being able to heal and repair. And I get it. My husband was he's a health junkie. And every week we would go to GNC or Vitamin World and, health food store. And then every time we'll come back with something. And then at some point I'm like, this is getting ridiculous. Look at all the supplements we have here. And you don't even know if they're really helping you, right? You're just kind of guessing. And ever since becoming involved with muscle testing, nutrition response testing, now we know that exactly what's on our medicine cabinet is exactly what we need to be taking. So I really appreciate, and I love the history lesson. I think that is so important because we know how things progress, right? And if we understand that, then we have a better appreciation of how the soil, right, became so deficient in nutrition and stuff
Well,
like
yeah, and on history, I mean, I I always thought, when I started in nutrition, that it was just happening right now.
that.
Like right now, people are understanding about nutrition, and it's never been
Yeah,
understood before. But when you look at history, there's a lot of history there, and one of my favorite things that I uncovered when I was looking and kind of looking back at where people got interested in it is from a time period of 1913
yeah. Uh-huh.
here in the United States. Um, a lot of people have heard that cocaine used to be in Coca-Cola, right?
Right. Yep.
Uh, well, the way that it got out of Coca-Cola was a guy named Dr. Harvey Wiley, and he was a chemist. And there was in 1908 there was a bill that was passed called the Pure Food and Drugs Act, and Dr.
Uh-huh.
Harvey Wiley was the head of this chemistry bureau. And basically, what he did is he said, "Okay, look, these different food companies are putting things in food that's not good."
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually started suing, and he had a list of different companies to go after that were doing things that he didn't feel were in the best interests of our health. The first one was cocaine and Coca-Cola. That happened. He won that. The second uh, one that went to the courts was he sued the Pillsbury Company.
Huh.
And the Pillsbury Company he sued because they were bleaching flour.
Yeah.
Now, why is that an issue? Well, bleached flour, when you bleach flour, it creates a chemical called alloxin. Alloxin is what they use to create diabetic mice for drug studies.
Oh my God.
So he said, look, if we're consuming as a society a chemical, even though it doesn't directly cause that right away,
Yeah.
what's it going to do long term? And, from 1913 to now, just look at how many people have type 2 diabetes, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's crazy. I'm not saying it's a one for one, but when you see how prevalent wheat is in there, there's a great book called Wheat Belly, which, interestingly enough, I did a YouTube video back in 2008 before Wheat Belly came out, talked about all this. And then I
Yes.
was so excited that a doctor picked it up somewhere. Research is all out there. I'm not saying he got it from me. I doubt it.
Right.
But he picked up on it and he wrote Wheat Belly, right? And then, it's all in there. everything that I had found, on that topic. And long story short, what ended up happening is that case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he actually won, but basically they came up with some kind of like, he wasn't popular, let's put it that way, because there was a lot of money behind it. And they ended up kind of saying, well, as long as there's not too much of it, it's not
Yeah.
that big of a deal,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of what happened there. And then it was so expensive for the U.S. government to go after these food companies that what they did is he resigned. He was going to get fired. And then they went ahead and guess who they hired as his replacement? The
Cool.
person that they just sued and took to the Supreme Court, the former head of the Pillsbury company. He became the new head of that, which then turned into the FDA.
Oh
So,
my.
and that's kind of the history of our food regulation, or one of the components in there, which is just wild. I mean, you can't write a better story than that. I mean, it's wild.
Yeah, it is. And I think, like it's interviews like this and it's conversations like this that make people think, right? It's thinking outside and the questioning of it, right? Being your own health advocate and not necessarily
Absolutely.
just like, oh, a company put it out there, it must be safe. And then you bring such an amazing concept too, where um, as long as it doesn't have a lot of it, right? So yeah, so we're not killing you right away. We're not, but we're killing you little by little, and like that effect of the boiling frog, right? Like if you put it in the pot in the stove and it's lukewarm and you just let it sit there and increase the temperature just little by little. Next thing you know, the water is boiling and the frog is just like comfortable, so like unaware of the change of that environment. So I love that, Nelson. Thank you for that. We, like I said, it's fascinating to understand how things develop so that you have a better understanding on, hey, we need to change things, right? And it's about changing policy. But I believe very much that we vote with our dollars, right? What we buy is what farmers are going to put out there, what companies are going to put out there. So I often daydream. Imagine if everybody at the same time just stopped buying soda.
Well, and to give you a great, like, some positive, right?
Yeah.
There's a documentary, I think Food Inc., and towards the end of it, I mean, there's some negative in there. Okay, don't get me wrong; it's not all a rosy picture. But when you look at Costco, for instance, they actually have more organic than Whole Foods Market, interestingly enough. But even Walmart, they have, like, boosted organic farming. And there are some naysayers, oh, they've lowered the regulations. I'm like, look, it's better than conventional, and they're keeping the majority of it there. And then
Well,
as we continue to buy those things, then it becomes more available. And then you have other companies that, because there's a market for that, then they can. Almond milk's a great example.
yeah.
Almond milk's a great food. And you have really bad versions of it that have a ton of different little additives in there. And then
Mm,
you've got the ones that it's almonds, right? But that almonds one that costs $8,
yeah.
let's say, may not exist without that one that's $2, right?
Yeah.
So you're opening a market at, having it available, and then you can have the more expensive version that is higher quality. It's kind of like the Apple
Yeah.
versus Android, to take it from a technological standpoint. And
Yes.
so I really applaud Walmart and Costco and some of these big companies that are bringing it and making it available to a
Yeah.
larger number, because ultimately that does bring down the cost, and it also makes it so that farmers can afford to
Yeah.
do it the way it needs to be done on a bigger scale,
Yeah.
and it just makes it more available,
Yeah.
and so I think that, you know, you're exactly right on that. And then on the boiling frog, that's where nutrition response testing comes in really handy, because instead of having to handle, like, I use the tin hat, the aluminum hat analogy, like sometimes you can have somebody that's so focused on everything that's wrong, it
Yeah.
becomes, well, then what do you do? and that's where nutrition response testing comes in, because you don't have to handle the EMFs from phones and the aluminum pans and the food additives and the fast food. You don't have to handle that all at the same time.
Yeah.
You can figure out what's affecting the body. Let's say somebody's coming in and they're having some hormonal problems and it shows up with BPA. Great. We're going to handle BPA. Don't drink from water bottles that are made out of BPA. Don't use microwaved dinners that are in plastic. Put it in a Pyrex dish that's glass, and cook it that way. You can still use your microwave. You can find things. You don't have to go all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a nut. You know what I mean? it puts it into perspective.
Yes. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. Gradient steps, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
We work with clients we meet them where they are. And then eventually, yes, you take that time to build, it's a lifestyle, right? Never think
and with each of those components, you understand it's not just somebody telling you, hey, don't have this. It's like, wow, I can actually see my health improve when I don't do that. So then that motivates you to actually do that, because if you're eating sugar and you feel miserable, and whether you have sugar or you don't, you still feel miserable, why bother not having sugar, right?
Of course. Yes.
But if you figure out what it is that's affecting the metabolism, get it, and then you have more energy, and that's why you were needing sugar, is to try to get more energy, and you have more energy without the sugar, then you can eat less sugar, and then your body starts to get better, your health gets better. Anyway, it just kind of snowballs. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So earlier you mentioned barriers, right? Things that are could be specifically stopping someone's healing process from taking place. Can you speak a little bit about what are some of the most common things? I mean, you've mentioned food sensitivities, you've mentioned chemicals. What are some of the other things that can be potentially affecting someone's health?
There are quite a few, and in nutrition response testing, it's really abrasive. We really look at a lot of different things, but there's 5 core things that we start with, because we find that they're the most common barriers. And one of them is immune challenges. We're all aware of these, like flu, mold allergies, bacteria, parasites, things like that.
Yeah.
Then you also have chemicals, that can be anything from recreational drug use to plastic bottles, BPA, building materials, things like that, things that are in our environment. And one of the things about chemicals that's wild is that they don't take any of that out of our water. It's in our water supply. And unless you're filtering your water, you're getting small amounts of that all the time, right? And so that's a really easy one to change. I mean, even a filter as simple as Pure, I think, which costs like $5 or $10 at Walmart, gets 99% of the chemicals out. So that's an easy no-brainer on how to, reduce your chemical intake on that. And then you've also got heavy metals. These are what's interesting about heavy metals. A lot of times people, where did I get that? Where did I get that? Where did I get that? And the truth is that the reason that the body holds on to metals is because of the lack of minerals, which we talked about earlier. When you don't have the proper mineral balance, then your body starts to substitute things that it can get from the environment. And we're so inundated with different metals, look at the toys from China that have lead, or, the cookware that has aluminum, or the water that's not filtered, that has all of that from what people have been consuming. So that's a real common thing, but it boils down to minerals, and getting the body to stop substituting and getting those minerals in there, and then letting go, and then getting that out. You've got to get that, get it through the colon and that sort of thing. And then the other one that's pretty wild as a barrier is something called a scar. A scar where, let's say that, I always use the analogy, you can feel my finger here. And the reason you can feel my finger is because there's nerves that come up to your skin. Right. And so in acupuncture, they actually use that network of nerves with needles to change how energy is flowing in the body.
Gotcha.
So those nerves interface with the rest of your body. And so when you have a scar that cuts across that nerve pathway, then what ends up happening, it can act like a needle that's there all the time. So you're getting an acupuncture needle that's there all the time. And so that can then change how energy flows in your body, and it can cause some different issues. So that's another one that's often overlooked
Yeah.
as something. And that's, kind of something that can sometimes make nutrition not work the way it's supposed to. Sometimes any
Mhm.
of those things that we just talked about can be something that influences your body to react differently to a nutritional supplement. So
Yeah.
let's say, I've a great example is somebody that drinks coffee, and instead of helping them stay awake, it helps them fall asleep.
Yeah.
You can have situations where the body kind of does the opposite of what it does for normally for other people. And those are examples of things that can do that.
Yeah, and it's so amazing how everything is connected, right? How one specific stressor may affect the adrenals or the kidneys, hormonal balance, and I something that I'm always trying to educate, especially women. It's like your cosmetics are chemicals and they're endocrine disruptors, and it's let's read our labels and stuff like this. It just brings that awareness. I think if oh, my body's been affected by, lead, it makes me think, oh, my baking powder, like some baking powder has lead and aluminum. And then you're like, oh my gosh, so
Hmm.
yeah, no, that's very interesting. So how, as a practitioner, does having this specific method help you not just be like chasing symptoms, right? Because we do want clients to feel better, right? We want people to feel better, but how does that help you get to the root cause of why someone may be experiencing something?
Well, symptoms are kind of like you know, that something's wrong. It's the check engine light on the car,
Yeah,
but it doesn't always tell you exactly why.
yeah,
You have to, plug in the diagnostic thing so it tells you the code, so you know kind of what area
yeah,
is going on. And our bodies tend to not, because there's so many different things and everything's so interconnected. You might not be able to just go, oh, it's this. And so nutrition response testing helps us kind of like pinpoint that. And so we're not necessarily going on the symptom, but sometimes symptoms are helpful because you can know where to look. If somebody's having pain here, I'm not going to ignore the fact that they may have a gallbladder problem, right?
yeah,
Or another common thing is, let's say somebody's going from sitting down to standing up and they feel dizzy to where
mhm,
they're going to fall.
yeah,
We know as a clinician that their adrenals are having some trouble, because your adrenals are what help your blood pressure go up so you get blood flow to the brain, and
yeah,
then it prevents that dizziness, right? So there are some things that symptoms do help you understand, but unless you know what they're trying to tell you, then it's kind of hard. And that's where allopathic medicine is great. They chase a lot of those things, and they're really good at, you've got this symptom, hey, try this, hey,
yeah,
try this. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so our approach is a little bit different than that, in the sense that we embrace the symptoms, we know that they're there, and we use them so we know if we're making progress. If we start handling hormones and the hot flashes go down, the way that we're actually handling the hormones is not by rubbing hormone creams on the body typically.
yeah,
It's going to be helping the glands that actually utilize those hormones or create those hormones become more efficient at their job.
right.
80% of your thyroid function, for instance, depends on your liver. So if the liver's having trouble, then you might have trouble
Yeah,
losing weight. You might
yeah,
have trouble with, your hair or skin or nails,
yeah,
things like that. And
yeah,
so, versus giving you the latest hair, skin, nail supplement
yeah,
that's just kind of a generic thing like that, what we would do is, if the liver showed up, support the liver, the thyroid starts to work better, hair stops falling out. And
yeah,
we didn't address the hair falling out other than by handling the underlying organ that was creating that situation in the first place.
That's awesome. I love it. I truly do. It's so preventive too, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
versus just yeah, most of us have reached a practitioner or people come to us and they're already going through something. But I love it where it becomes a family affair where um mom or dad may come to the office and then now they bring the whole family. And the next thing your whole waiting room is, everybody getting their health checks and getting tested. So no, thank you so much for sharing that. Are there any specific successes or cases you wanted to share with the audience to see how this could
That's always an interesting one because what we do is so out of the ordinary
yeah
that, and some of the things that I've seen happen, I
yeah
still can't believe, right? So if I were to tell you some of my more amazing ones, the just the incredulity of them, the lack of like belief, oh, this guy's just talking it up. So I've got to kind of like, let's tone it down. We'll give you some of the more ones
yeah
that, of course, it helps with that, right? So, of course, weight loss. I love helping people with acne. Helping their skin be able to eliminate better. A lot of times, what happens is when your body can't eliminate properly, it'll start to come out through the skin, right? So I've seen amazing changes with that. Um, Irritable bowel, I've seen people that suffer with inflammation just constantly. I've had that improve. Cholesterol is another one that their doctor starts yelling at them, and well, okay, let's change your diet a little bit and let's do a couple of things here or there, and then wow, I went to the doctor. I don't have to take the statin, and I always love it when that's the case, or somebody who's been feeling down. They've had a lot of fatigue and they're not feeling great, and their doctor just said, "Well, you're just depressed," and they put them on some sort of drug related to that, and you find out that maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just really, really tired, and they had
yeah
some problems with their adrenals, and so you get their adrenals working better, and then I'm sleeping better. I'm not as tired. And I always love it because we're one of the main things that we're doing is we're working to fix the relationship between the part of the nervous system that deals with stress and the part that deals with healing. And if a tiger is charging to attack you, you want to get energy so you can run away.
yeah
Well, if you had the opposite response to that, let's say you started digesting food and you fell asleep, the tiger's going to get you, right?
yeah
So, in the same example, there's so many times where somebody will come in and they say, "Man, I can sleep. I
yeah
couldn't sleep, or I'm feeling so rested." Or I had somebody last week that said, "Man, is it okay for me to sleep like 14 hours?" And I go, "Well, you hadn't slept but like for 3 or 4 for like 2 or 3 years, so yeah, you're catching up." And so those are some great things that I've seen.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love it. I love hearing, other practitioners, how the amazing wins and successes that they are helping us create with, as a patient, as a client myself first, and then having become a practitioner. So nice to have that both sides of the coin. So no, thank you
Hmm.
so much for that. So I feel like we've learned so much. I mean, we touched about nutrition response testing, right? What that is, muscle testing. We also talked about the different stressors and different things that could be inhibiting someone's health and someone's body from, healing and repairing. And I love the approach on like understanding, how things have progressed and how the different lifestyle changes and the gradient approach that you take on with your clients. And if someone were to be like, I need to start working with Joseph, where can we find him? How can we find you? How can people who are listening who are might be hopefully close to your area, find you?
Yeah, so my website is nutritionaustin.com. That's a good place to start. Um, I also have a podcast, which is neglected greatly, but there are some great episodes on there, which is healthmatters.com.
Okay.
Health Matters Podcast, excuse me,
Okay.
healthmatterspodcast.com. And then on my website, I've also got you can sign up for my newsletter. I do a monthly newsletter, so you can get information that way. And then if you're in Austin or around Austin, I have every 2 weeks, I have health seminars in my practice that we put on, and you're welcome to come to one of those. On my website, just click on health seminars and you'll see the different topics that we go over. And if you see a topic you're interested in, there's a place on the page where you can sign up for that one, and they're free, um, so yeah, those are probably the best ways to find me.
That's awesome. So we'll make sure to put all those different links in the comments, or we'll make them accessible for people to be able to find them, because I know for a fact that if I had not found a practitioner like Joseph, a practitioner like me, few years ago, I think I would still live with horrendous headaches, totally over medicated, and with no hope of feeling better. So I know firsthand that it works, as long as you do what your practitioner is asking you to do, and that you don't give up, right? Because it's about um, persistence, and just following on that path of that healing and repairing.
Well,
Awesome.
yeah, and I like to, I always like to give the example, if you've got a car,
Yeah.
and even a person, a body's a little bit different than a car in that it can repair itself, but if you've got a car, it tends to go like this. And even as we age, normal is like this. And so the first step, when you see something that's not going the way you want it to, the first step is to stop it from getting worse.
Yeah.
Right? That's the first step. And then once you stop it from getting worse, then getting better. And so, it's kind of, you have to see how quickly you can get something to stop getting worse and
Yeah.
then work to start getting it to go better. And, it's always fun seeing both of those things happen. And it's different for every person. Some people, man, what did you do? It's like you flipped a switch and,
Yeah.
it's very, very fast. And then sometimes it's a little grueling, but I think the ones that take a little bit more time oftentimes are situations where the length of time to get to that point was longer, and they
Mm.
may just not have known what was going on.
Yeah.
They've been
Yeah.
dealing with it for a long time.
Yeah, totally. Journal, thank you so much. Very unique, very tailor made to the person. And I think every client every patient you see, they're very lucky because you're very knowledgeable. I'm almost
Oh, thank you.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I
You
really
got it.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time and your knowledge, and thank you everybody for spending your time watching this interview, listening to the interview, and if there are any other health topics that you are eager to hear about, just send us a message, and we'll make sure to have some of those topics available for you. All right, signing off. Thank you so
Okay.
much.